All right, everyone. I'm excited to introduce my next guest, star of Trick or Treat, Killer Tomatoes Eat France, and loved and beloved to millions as Skippy from Family Ties. Welcome to the show, the hilarious Marc Price. How are you, sir?
Well, thank you so much. And my puppy, that's Casper.
Hello,
Good stretch.
Casper.
Good stretch. It's obligatory when the dog does that. You say, good stretch.
Good stretch.
So I'm on a good stretch of my tour right now in a very beautiful place, not far from San Diego. And but that's the beauty of San Diego. I did that movie Killer Tomatoes Eat France that you mentioned. Was ironically shot some in Paris, believe it or not, and some, the rest of it, most of it in San Diego. And it was the director of Killer Tomatoes Eat France that first taught me about San Diego and all it has to offer. It's an amazing place. I don't frequent it that often. I play there, maybe once every couple of years. It's got it all. If you want rolling hills, beaches, mountains, deserts, forests, it's got it.
Amazing. So, you know all this from John DeBello.
Yes.
So, they say don't work with kids, animals, or tomatoes. So how was it like to be you were in the final Killer Tomato movie? That was, I think, the fourth one. That was like the last one.
They called it part 4 of the trilogy. And yes, I helped kill the franchise. That's my job. You know who was in the one before me was George Clooney. I'm not kidding.
No, I know. That's any other notables? Like I think
George
like Johnny Depp was in
this one.
Johnny Depp was in Friday the 13th. No, Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like there's
that was a good one too. Oh, that was a good one. Oh, we might head into the car. It might be raining a little bit here. But yeah, Johnny Depp. That was a good one. That was a good nightmare. I think that very first one. Yeah, that was one of the best ones.
Yeah. So
creepiest one.
So did you get to know John Astin?
I did. He's the father of Sean Astin. For your viewers' sake, we can say he's the guy that played Gomez on Addams Family, which, by the way, most of your viewers probably don't remember that. Do you remember that?
I know, of course. Andy was part-time the Riddler on Batman. I know.
Wow. I didn't even remember that. And so we got to hang out quite a bit. And people have always told me I look like Sean Astin, or I used to when I was younger. And he agreed. He said, yeah, we look a lot alike. And he's his dad. So I always consider that official confirmation.
I actually just oddly enough just saw a TikTok on Sean Astin saying his life was sort of a Mamma Mia, where John Astin was his adoptive father, but not necessarily his blood father. And he didn't find out who his real father was until later in life. So he's got relationships with multiple people. Now, my source is a TikTok video, so I have no idea if it's true or not.
That might be the case. I never really got into it too much as far as, when you're a stepdad, you tend to love the child just like it's your own. You don't get into it with people about it.
No, I just thought it was just an interesting story. I think it's great. And so, and of course I knew he was Gomez Addams. Who doesn't know John? No one listening to this podcast.
Did you know he was way ahead of the curve on healthy eating and healthy living? I don't know. I hate to say it. I'm not even sure. Is he even still with us? Because he's.
I think he is. I think he is actually.
It wouldn't surprise me because he was. When we met at that time, he was such a healthy eater. He was not going to stop that either. He really understood it.
So question for you, Marc. So right now you're touring the world as a comedian, and did you start as a comedian? Did I read you were doing this as early as like 14, and your dad was a Borscht Belt comedian? I mean, you come from entertainers.
I do. I was that kid in the back of the theater. My dad literally was the kid they would bring in the cart or whatever they used to call it, the trunk, born in a trunk in the back of the theater. But for me, I was in the hospital, but it wasn't long after that I was being brought up on stage as a cheap device for applause at the end of the show, because my mom was a singer and my dad was the comedian, and then they'd bring me out at the end.
Your mom also, I read, sang with Fabian.
She did all kinds of amazing things, including she played in Vegas. She had contracts in Vegas for like a year at the Desert Inn and stuff like that. And it was just a different time in showbiz. I tell people this story, because it's hard to imagine where they were so rude to women as they were then. And so that she hated it. She hated showbiz. She wanted out. In fact, she hated my dad. She hated my dad. She hated showbiz, and she became a cop.
Really?
Yeah, just to get away from showbiz. She went to school, went to the police academy, did some dangerous stuff, worked her way up, worked really hard, and accomplished a lot of great things before she retired. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you grow up just loving? I know you mentioned you were schlepped out as a baby for the band Applause, but were you aware of this limelight idea? And was this what sparked you to kind of want to go into the entertainment field?
I always look at myself in the mirror after a podcast. I go, I got schmutz. And now I'm doing it during the podcast to make sure. Just no schmutz. This is a schmutz-free podcast. I didn't shave for you, by the way. Forgive me. I read in GQ magazine that women, you have women viewers, right, are turned on by a man with a 2-day beard. And I let it go 6 days. I thought I would triple my odds.
At least true. I think it's quadruple. The more days, it's exponential. I don't think it's straight math, but I think it's exponential. So you should, when this podcast is over and you roll out of that car, especially with your dog, you'll probably be fending them off. So
yeah,
good for you, sir.
Well, if you're young and skinny and you've got a beard, you're a hipster. But at my age, you're a homeless guy living out of your car. Hold on one second. And that's the alarm.
Okay. I didn't hear it. So it was whatever sound protection you have is working great. So, all right. So Marc, you're a prop for your father on stage. When did you decide this is something I want to pursue and do? Well,
geez. It was kind of drilled into me from a young age that was my profession. I don't think I had much choice in the matter. My mom didn't want it for me at all. She wanted everything the right way, for me to go to Cornell and have a family. And she set me up for all that. But the allure of Hollywood was too much to take. I couldn't, the idea of paying attention and doing homework and stuff like that wasn't for me when I had the option of going to the comedy clubs and hanging out with the comedians.
Yeah, your mom probably wanted you to grow up and be a sergeant and a police officer. You guys could have been a mom and son team, and then you could have adapted that into a movie. It could have been a whole series. There's a whole thing there, I think. Just sitting.
Well,
there.
I was embarrassed when I was a kid. My friends would come over and they'd see the police uniform and the handcuffs, and I'd be like, "Oh, my mom's a stripper," and kind of like my mom does with me now. So your son's a comic and he's touring comedy clubs. No, he joined Al Qaeda, my son. but yeah, she had it all set for me. Always listen to your mother. That's what we learn here, and never listen to your father is the flip side of that. I moved out to live with my dad in Hollywood, and I started hanging out at the comedy clubs. And it wasn't long before I was on TV and doing Family Ties and all that good stuff.
I was looking at your IMDb.
I want to go outside and show you this beautiful place where I'm at, but it's raining, but it's not raining horribly. You see this?
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really nice here. I'm near Ramona, California.
Well, I appreciate you on the road. We're on the road with Marc Price. This is
I'm going to show off.
We're fully remote. In his car, he's got a dog. He's got a backpack. I think he's gonna. He's got a thing, or he can drink his own pee. I made that up. That's not true. All right. Wait. So I was looking at your IMDb, and the way they kind of do those IMDb's, the Family Ties is kind of in the middle. But when I started looking at the dates, did you get into Family Ties almost immediately? Land that gig right away? I mean, I know you had other things in the beginning of your career, like One Day at a Time and Archie Bunker's Place, but those are all in the same 1982, which is when Family Ties started as well.
it was a big year for me. I wasn't a recurring, which is what they call that when you start, ultimately I was a recurring character, but it was just a one shot thing at first. And then it grew to 2 things and then 3 things. It didn't become a recurring character until the 3rd season.
Yeah, that's another thing that I noticed. You were like 2 episodes in season 1, 3 in season 2. When I talked to Scott Valentine, that was the kind of the same trajectory with Nick. That was meant to be like a one-off thing too. And then season 3, you had like 10 episodes. So you're probably like in nearly half the season. So or so. But what was that like? I mean, like, because they must have liked you and then they started building it around you, I'm assuming.
Something like that. The network also encouraged them, so that was good. I was had the call from the big honcho at the network. Hey, how about the Skippy guy? Maybe we should use him more.
Did they? I mean, was this because of buzz? I mean, what caused this guy to pick up the phone and tell the Family Ties gang, we need more Skippy?
More Skippy.
More Skippy. I mean, it's an obvious conclusion, but how did we get there?
I was young, and I think they liked the idea of keeping the show young. That was the idea, to appeal to young people and have a young person. I think that helped. And who knows? Just got lucky. It was all the right things. I think the executive producer, I reminded him of him when he was a nerdy kid and that kind of thing. I was also very comfortable at the Paramount Studios where I auditioned and where we made the show and stuff, because I had hung out there before. My dad's good friend played the grumpy dad on Laverne and Shirley. And I got to hang out and watch them make Laverne and Shirley. And then he invited me to hang out all week and watch them make Bosom Buddies and Happy Days and all the other shows on the lot, and Mork and Mindy and stuff like that. And so that was, a college education packed into a week of how a sitcom is made.
That's a murderer's row of shows you just rattled off.
There were more too. Those are the ones I remember, like hanging out, like Tom Hanks coming up to me, seeing a little kid hanging out, watching and doing shtick for me and making me laugh. And nobody knew who he was yet.
Yeah.
Or at least I didn't.
No, I think that was like his first thing. He was on that and The Love Boat. I mean, right. I mean, like that's early Tom Hanks. We all loved him.
He ended up being on Family Ties too. And Family Ties was shot either in the very same studio or like right next door. Like it was one of 2 studios right there. Anyway, what a great
turnaround. People forget Tom Hanks's early career. No one saw Tom Hanks's early career and said this is the trajectory of one of the biggest stars in the world, right? I mean, because he did Bachelor Party, stuff like movies like that, and then all of a sudden it's just like, I don't know. He just got I think it was the Penny Marshall movie, right? League of Their Own, and then he just
no, it was before that. It was before that. It was the Ron Howard movie.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
Splash.
Splash. Right. Splash.
That was the beginning. But what's funny is you just mentioned Penny Marshall, and then there's Ron Howard. These guys all came. That was Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days.
Right. So you're hanging out with. It's funny. So you were hanging out. Your dad knew Laverne's dad on the show,
right? Because he was an old-time comedian.
Yeah, he was great.
He helped a lot of
I could picture him. Yeah.
He helped a lot of people's careers, but mine was definitely one of them. He gave me that, he allowed me to go check out watch everybody. I got to watch Penny Marshall.
It's crazy. And like Peter Scolari would have been there too. I think
the little kid from Andy Griffith, we were just talking about him, who directs movies.
Ron Howard?
I'm getting old. Ron Howard he had already left Happy Days at that time, I remember.
Okay, so this was in the later seasons of Happy Days.
Well, it was in I guess so, because 70s was the big time for Happy Days, and this was like, late, like 79 or something like that.
Yeah, I think he was gone for like him and Donnie Most. They left like later on. I think they left at the same time.
No, Donnie Most was still there. It might have been that he just wasn't there that day or something.
Okay, got it. Okay. So this could be any time for him. Did Fonzie jump the shark yet? If you were doing Mork and Mindy, it would have had to been after then he was on Happy Days. So it had to been at least into it. So, all right. So you're watching Mork and Mindy too. So you're watching Robin Williams and Mark. That just sounds amazing.
I had seen Robin Williams um, live at an improv class. There was a famous improv class that a lot of people from different eras would come to. You know, that's one of the things in show business that in the late 70s and early 80s existed that doesn't really exist anymore. The coming together of generations. Like the Family Ties writing staff included one guy, just brilliant, and he wrote on like the movie Blazing Saddles, and he wrote for like Robert Klein's stand-up comedy.
Oh, wow.
You know, and then there was another guy that was just out of college. He's gone on to big things, and he's written a lot of movies for Sandra Bullock, and he's gone on to direct big movies, and he's become a big deal in Hollywood. But at that time, he was a college student that wrote a spec script and sent it in, but they really liked it, and they liked him. And he came out and met with everybody and everything, and then they mixed that staff together. One of our younger producers ended up being the creator of King of Queens.
Oh, okay.
But it was neat how they combined the older guys with the younger people, and that's something they don't do anymore. Now it's just all young people. So there's nobody, the young people can't learn. We had writers that had written on Mary Tyler Moore and, you know, stuff like that.
Family Ties. Did you came in like episode 9 or something like that, like, so into the season. So was this like they were developing the character, or was this a kind of the scenario where up front they knew this character was going to exist, but you didn't just show up until that point?
No, I was just a one-shot deal. It's just I just did an episode, and then they invited me back, and it kind of grew. It blossomed. And it could have been any other show too. I got really lucky that it was a good show. You know, imagine if it had been some shoddy show, which there were plenty of.
Right. I mean, right. There's always that. There's more of those than probably the ones that we remember.
Yeah, I got lucky, you know. I got lucky to even be a small part of something this really fantastic. And I think all of us appreciated it at the time, but maybe not enough. It wasn't like everybody was blasé about it. We knew how talented everybody was, and it was a gift, and it was all. But looking back, it really was. I just won the lottery.
Were you there then? I can't remember which season it would have fallen, like where Michael J. Fox was doing Back to the Future, like where all that collided.
Yes, I was there. Yes, with the limo and all that. Yeah, where he'd sleep in the limo. He'd sleep in the limo on the way to the set.
Did you get to go to like that?
I did. I got to go to the set and stuff and hang out and everything. And I was friends with some other folks that worked on the movie, including a stuntman that did a lot of great stuff on the movie. That's a very close friend of mine. And as well as Crispin Glover, who played his dad. I went to acting school with Crispin Glover, my first acting school when I was like 13 years old. And he took me under his wing. He was one of my first influences, and he wasn't quite as crazy back then, but absolutely as brilliant as he is now. Brilliant man.
He's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of Back to the Future lore, I think he sued them for the second movie because they imitated his face or something with that actor. And I think he won.
It set a precedent. It set a precedent that means something even more now that they have AI and the ability to do a lot more than that. Was just like a makeup prosthetic that they used of him on another actor. Now they can make a George Carlin. You know, you heard about that, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. It was. Well, speaking of AI, Mallory.
I know both actors, by the way. I'm friends with Crispin Glover and with the actor that went on to take his place, the wonderful Jeffrey Weissman, who's a great guy. And while Crispin and Jeffrey will never be friends with each other, they could be actually if they would just. Maybe I should try to set that up.
How did Jeffrey feel about having to wear Crispin's face?
Hey, it's an acting job.
It's a job, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of AI,
he did a good job. Okay. Nobody knew it wasn't him, right? So he did a good job.
Yeah, they kind of the way they kind of positioned it and all that. It was like afterwards, you're like, oh yeah. But anyway, you mentioned AI. Justine Bateman, she was like leading the whole crew with the whole AI awareness, as all the tweets and stuff that I was watching.
That's a wonderful thing for her. You know, she's a born leader. It would be great if maybe she ran the union or something like that. Could happen. You know, there's been a history of that, right? Like the little girl from Little House on the Prairie.
Right, Melissa Gilbert. Yeah.
She ran Screen Actors Guild. I think Justine Bateman would make a wonderful president for Screen Actors Guild. You know, her dad, she came from a show business background from her dad as well. He was an acting teacher, producer, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and her brother does pretty good too.
Well, yeah, and her brother is one of the best. Yeah, always great guy.
Yeah, he
Great
seems
guy.
like
Used to, these guys. I got to hang out with Jason Bateman back in the day, and he showed me around his sitcom and a different. He was at Warner Brothers, and I hadn't really been. I had really been at Paramount most of the time, and he showed me around the different studios at Warner Brothers. It was a pre 9/11 world. You could walk in if you were on the lot. You could pretty much snoop around. That's not allowed anymore. You can't just go on the lot and snoop around, I got to do a lot of that because of, certainly at Paramount, but even at the different lots when I would have auditions and things, I would just go way early and I would just snoop around all afternoon. I'd get out of school. The audition could be at 4:00. And a lot of times they knew you went to school and they would make the auditions, later in the day. But I would tell the school, I got to leave at 12. I've got my audition. Go to.
You were working it. You were like taking full advantage of your super famousness. Do you keep in touch with any of the cast, or do you guys in a group text chat or anything like that?
My Skippy superpowers, which have waned, by the way. No, we don't have a group text chat. We did get together there was a big reunion, which was pretty cool. But no, everybody sees each other sort of individually in different ways. This weekend, I'm going to see Brian Bonsall, the little kid on the show, who, they had a baby, and then the next season, it was a little youngster, not the same. If they didn't stick to the years and the aging, I don't know if you know that, if you're a Family Ties nerd enough to know that.
I watched Family Ties all the way through.
I'm saying, so I don't know if you remember the baby.
I remember the kid. I remember the short little blonde kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's Brian Bonsall, and he made movies and did all kinds of stuff. And he's actually played in some pretty successful bands over the last couple of decades, including one called Atari that all the kids know. And it's like a punk band, and he's a successful musician.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And Teeny Yothers came to the Improv and actually joined me on stage. She hosted a show and did stand up, really had the crowd going, and it was a blast. That was just a real trip. And we're raising money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation at every stop on the tour. Michael's very grateful. And we have a new Skippy squad set up. If you go to teamfox.org, you can join the Skippy squad and help raise money for this fantastic cause. And I just was in touch with Michael Gross, who played the dad on the show last week, regarding they want to make him the honoree at the Boston Comedy Festival this year.
That's really cool.
Yeah. They've had some big honorees in the past.
His sister was on Saturday Night Live. I remember watching her.
That's right. Mary Gross.
Yep.
Another fantastic talent. I think she's dropped out of sight, though. We haven't seen her. She, I think by choice, got out of the business.
It sounds like
I'm wrong, and she has a new thing coming out.
Oh, is it? I don't know. I'll Google her after. So one piece of trivia I saw on IMDb, which I never trust, but I like to ask. The cast wanted to end the show with the entire family dying in a plane crash, so they didn't have to do a reunion show.
I don't know if there was joking about stuff like that. And at the time, you look at like Gilligan's Island Returns or whatever, they're still on the island, after all these years. And it seemed like we didn't want to do that. Mary Tyler Moore was always the roadmap for our show. And that was such a classy show, and it ended, and there never was, more Mary or something different. And it ended after 7 years like ours did. The idea was, we didn't want to belittle the show by coming back in some lesser form some years later. But now, of course, that all the time has gone by.
Right. They could do Skippy's Place, and you're a comedian. It's like,
there you go. I'm in. Let's do it.
I like when they do the retrospective.
I think all the cast members would pretty much be in right now if they wanted to do that.
I like when they get the cast together just to talk, not necessarily become your character, not become the Keaton family again or something.
We did something like that not that long ago on the internet, not unlike this, where we all got together for a hello.
That's cool. That is very cool. One thing that you were a part of that I kind of remember, but Condo with McLean Stevenson. It was funny because there was one joke from it that I remember where he's like, it's him and it's a Mexican family, and they wanted to name the child Jesus, and he's like, I will not let that kid be named Jesus and have him come running every time I cut myself. And And it was just a joke. I remember watching. I was like, I remember like that's the only thing I remember from the show is that joke. Anyway, I just thought,
The producers were about the most successful producers in sitcom history, with shows like Soap and Golden Girls and blah 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 and all those. You know, they did a lot of big hit shows. And McLean Stevenson was hysterical. You know, he used to co-host the Tonight Show.
mm.
That's how funny he was. Like, he was that capably funny that they had him do that. He was a great storyteller. He would just have us just rolling on the floor. They gave him maybe more chances at a new sitcom after MASH than anybody else in the history of sitcoms. He had like 6 pilots.
Yeah, I mean, he was so great in MASH. It's like, you know, but sometimes it's hard to just find, you know, the lightning
They tried
in the bottle
everything
again.
He was a DJ. He was a priest. He was an astronaut. And in this one, he was a wasp that was, we were a downwardly mobile family that had to sell our house and move into a condo. And next door was a Mexican family that had built up a big gardening company and got to move up out of the barrio and into the condo. And now that we lived next door, there was a lot of tension and fighting, but the 2 kids fall in love. So it was Romeo and Juliet, my older brother and their daughter fall in love. And that was the show. We did like a half a season. You know, I think we did 13 episodes. It was, you know, it was a great experience working with McLean Stevenson and Luis Avalos, my childhood hero from the electric company when I was a little kid, played the dad on the other side of the family.
It had all the pieces. It just, yeah, sometimes I guess shows just don't click the way you want them to.
And you know what else we had? We had a theme song by Paul Williams. And I meet Paul Williams every once in a while somewhere to this day. And I shake his hand. He's always very nice and stuff. And he pretends like he remembers me anyway. But he remembers that song. I mentioned that song to him and he remembers it because, you know, how many, I don't know.
He's done everything. I mean, he's Rainbow Connection. He's the Love Boat. Yeah.
This was a Love Boat level song. This was like, it didn't sound like the Love. It had a Mexican kind of flair to it. Live and love it up. It was a little bit like the Love Boat, actually, now that I think about it. It had a little Love Boat in it, but I like the way it started.
Yeah, Paul Williams is amazing. And then just real quick, because I know you talk about it, at least you have, I know you have the swag at the show for Trick or Treat. That's your Eddie Weinbauer. Yeah. For your viewers that don't remember, Trick or Treat is with Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons. It has a fantastic soundtrack by the heavy metal band Fastway. And I think that's what keeps it going is those things, you know, that Ozzy and Gene Simmons and this great soundtrack. It's got a following of people that really loved it and love it still. And it's every Halloween I'm at a screening of it somewhere and people ask me questions about it all the time and stuff. You know, they're from that audience, depending on how they're dressed. It's cool. I mean, so you have like all these, you have like Family Ties, which is, we'll call it mainstream pop culture, classic, iconic show and character. And then you have these cult classics like Trick or Treat and Killer Tomatoes Eat France. Those are a nice separate genre. So you probably cover your fan base.
Yeah, but a lot of people know Trick or Treat and come up to me and stuff. I've met like 6 people lifetime that have seen Killer Tomatoes.
But those 6 people are special. That's a special 6 people.
I'm always like, where did you see it? How do you even watch it? Where do I go?
Like if I ever saw, that's like on the level of like if I ever saw Michael Pare and I would say, Mister, I saw Eddie and the Cruisers 2. Eddie lives in the theater. And he would say to me, you were one of those 7 people that actually saw it in the theater. I'd be like, yes, because I'm a fan. And
Eddie and the Cruisers.
Not 1, 2. The second one I saw in the theater. Yeah, so that would be like that level. So those 6 people that saw that movie, that would be very special.
Well, I'm sure they didn't see it. I'm sure the 6 people didn't see it in the theater. That's for sure. Well, no, I think the only time it was in the theater was for the screening for the cast and crew. It was the first time we had ever seen it. And in the opening credits, they put in, please rewind this cassette after viewing. And we thought that was so funny.
So have you stepped away from acting? Is the comedy full time? Do you act when the opportunity arises? Or is comedy now your life?
Well, comedy's been my life for quite some time now, but I did act in a movie for my first time in decades this last year. It's coming out this next year, or this year, 2024, and it's called Witchy Ways. And I play the bad guy. It's a co-starring role, but it's the antagonist. I've never done that before, so that was fun. I'm not the monster. It's a horror movie, but I'm the agitator.
I'm gonna watch that and Killer Tomatoes from France. No. Marc,
and the rescue with Kevin Dillon. That goes in my really bad film festival. That's in there too. That one was a big studio film, and we go into North Korea. Remember, there was some tension with North Korea over a movie about North Korea.
Oh, do you remember the Seth Rogen one?
Yeah. Well, our movie goes into North Korea too. I figure I might have had a screening by the evil leader.
One of my claim to fame is that Seth Rogen movie. It was so controversial when they rolled it out. Everyone was afraid to watch it, and I watched it. And then I was actually interviewed on the BBC for having seen it right on opening night.
It was funny, wasn't it?
I love that movie. I thought it was great.
It was really funny, yeah.
Eminem is hilarious in it. And James Franco, Seth Rogen. I can watch that movie over and over again. And then the one guy who's in everything now, who played Kim Jong-un. I don't know his name off the top of my head. He's brilliant in that movie. He's just so great.
Indeed. We probably like the same kind of movies.
Oh, I'm sure we do. So before, just run real quick, just to kind of bookend the comedy thing.
It's that time. I wish I could give you a better tour of this place. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's not rating enough. Here, Casper, come here. Come on. Let's give this guy a tour. Go ahead. Ask anything.
Well, so talk to me like the time frame before Family Ties, before you became an actor with your life in comedy, because you were a comedian first, then you got into acting, right? Or you may have been doing both, but you were doing comedy before.
It all stems from my dad being a comedian, right? So that gave me this unusual ability to watch him and watch the greats. He would take me to see Robert Klein and Jackie Mason, from the old school. And
Amazing.
and he would take me to the comedy clubs too. I got to see Seinfeld and Jay Leno and those guys do their thing in the 70s in New York at Catch a Rising Star. Ultimately, the guys from my dad's era became known as corny, and they were mocked by the very next generation of young comedians, the Sam Kinison generation or whatever. A lot of times, those guys had a set of rules, and now there were no rules. And that was what made them so hip and exciting, was they were so different from that other generation. The point that I'm making is, at some point, they started to look down on the old school. It happens. As I'm getting older, I understand that. The case was with, at first, that wasn't the case. Like Richard Belzer and those guys from the Catch a Rising Star and the Improv in New York City in the 70s, they actually really looked up to those guys that were their predecessors, and they learned from them, and they got a great deal of respect. And so when my dad would go to the clubs in New York, he would bring me again. We lived in a pre-9/11 world. Casper's like, no, I won't have it. It's just too wet outside. And so they would let me in. So that was, I got to sneak in and stuff. I don't think you could sneak a kid in a nightclub now, but you could in the 70s.
You could do pretty much anything in the 70s, right?
If your dad was a comic, anyway.
Oh, look at you.
We look at that face.
Well, Marc,
all right,
I know you got to go, but
only because I got to get back on the road. It's raining, and I don't want it to get too muddy and all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you hanging with me. It was good seeing you again. It was.
We met with Mr. Steve Heitner.
Steve Heitner, that's right. Banyan from Seinfeld. It was a great.
Are you having him on the podcast?
I interviewed him as well. And
I enjoy working with him as much as any other comic in the history of comics. I've worked with some great ones. There's others that I enjoy as well, but he just keeps me going. It's like really, we've had 5-hour drives that feel like 10 minutes with him. He just keeps me laughing.
He's great. It was a lot. The weekend flew by hanging out with you guys. It was a lot of fun, and so cool. Well, I'm glad we were able to catch up again. We'll talk Olivia Rodrigo next time.
Okay, we'll do that. Next time we'll talk about Love Your Guts.
Love Your Guts. Bye.